Good morning, boys and girls of the internet. Today is Friday, July 20th, 2018, and vlog number 200. The big 200. Wow. I didn't think I'd get this far. Kind of something, though. I mean, there was a lot of days that I really couldn't think of much to say or just rambled on about nonsense, but I still did it every day. Came out, did a vlog. Pretty proud of that. As you notice, of course, no me today. I want to continue kind of what I was discussing yesterday with, old school video games. What better way to do that with some new school video game? We're looking at some more God of War footage. So yeah, I was thinking today, I was like, man, there was a lot of good 16-bit games, especially like on Genesis. Some of my favorite games also include remember like the old Aladdin game. That game was so freaking amazing. The Genesis version was obviously the better version compared to Super Nintendo. It was a completely different game. Earthworm Jim. Earthworm Jim was freaking amazing. The animation, the freaking wackiness is so cool. I loved, me and my friend, we loved playing, it was a two-player game, Toe Jam and Earl. If y'all didn't play that, that game was so freaking cool. And it was one of the few games that I remember playing back then that it was the first one I've ever seen where the world was randomly generated. Like you went through like levels, and each level was, just random, and that was pretty cool. And of course, like it was hilarious, fun as hell, and just, I hear they're making a new one, but I think they had it on Kickstarter. I'm not sure how well it did, but nothing ever beats the original. I think they made a sequel. They made a second one that wasn't too good. But yeah, there was so many awesome games back then, and who could forget like awesome games like Streets of Rage. Streets of Rage, especially the second game, the music in that game was phenomenal. To this day, the soundtrack, that's one of the best soundtracks from the 16-bit era. Hands down. I'm sure not many people would disagree. Let's see what else. I already mentioned things like Golden Axe and stuff. I'm forgetting a lot of good games. There's a couple like obscure games I kind of like. There was one called Shadow of the Beast. That was pretty good. I remember playing Michael Jackson's Moonwalker, which was completely different than the arcade version. Arcade version, like, it was like a top-down, like, 3-player game, kind of. But then they made the Genesis version. It was like a side-scroller. Being a Michael Jackson fan a long time ago, Moonwalker was, it was pretty fun to play. Let's see. There's so many other good games. I really should just go through a list of awesome Genesis games and kind of like I said, I can be talking about this for days. But like I said, I more or less, that got me to be a Sega fan. Even though I loved a lot of Super Nintendo games, on a Super Nintendo we got all kinds of cool. We imported more of the Dragon Ball games. We got like Super Butoden 3. There's one called, I think, Final Bout, was it? Or Hyper Dimension, that's right. Dragon Ball Hyper Dimension. That game was pretty cool. Now, fast forward to the 32-bit era. That was the first time. That was around the time when I got my first job, and what I did with my first paycheck, I bought a Saturn because I was such a Sega fan. My very first paycheck, my very first job, I went and I bought a Sega Saturn. And I love that thing. You know, that my Saturn was freaking amazing. You know, going into a new 32-bit era. You know, the visuals were, you know, far beyond what I can imagine back, you know, in the 16-bit days. You know, they look archaic now, but Saturn has some amazing games. Now, unfortunately, I was also kind of, Sega was already on the downhill in terms of popularity because Sega kind of messed things up in terms of upgrades to their Genesis line. They had they kept coming up with new generations of the Genesis. Not only that, you know, they had a Sega CD, which it was cool and all, but it was an expensive upgrade. Not many people were willing to fork over it for this upgrade, and there weren't too many games specifically for it. And then they decided, oh, let's go even further. Let's make a 32X. You know, an add-on for the Genesis popped in the top, and it was supposed to be a 32-bit upgrade. Now, you know, that's debatable with, you know, how much better it actually was. I've actually never played the 32X. You know, it was just something I was never interested in, I guess, and just with the Sega CD, they just didn't have games for it, so that killed that. So when by the time Saturn came out, Sega's reputation was kind of already, you know, on a downhill slide. But it did come out first before PlayStation. Sony was making the PlayStation, and Nintendo still was far off with coming out with their N64. So Sega enjoyed a little bit of a head start ahead of PlayStation, but still, they were never going to be first place in the 32-bit era. But even despite all that, I was still a major fan of the Saturn. I thought the system was plenty powerful. I loved the controller for it. It was great for fighting games. And that was also another thing about Saturn. It had the games that you couldn't really get anywhere else. In terms for my taste. For some reason, especially in Japan, it was like the platform of choice for arcade fighting game ports. Because, you know, around that time in the 90s, there's all kinds of awesome fighting games coming out in the arcades. And they ported like perfectly to the Saturn. Because at the time also, Sega had an arcade board that, you know, of course Sega made all kinds of arcade games, you know, for years and years. But their arcade board pretty much was a Saturn. So it made it super easy to port arcade games to the Saturn. All they really had to do is, for some Saturn games, you had to put in a RAM cartridge. Basically, you had to upgrade your Saturn with RAM. And there was a 1 meg RAM, and I think there was like a 6 meg RAM that you can get. Some games needed like the 1, some need more, so you get the 6 meg. One of the games that needed that was awesome game by SNK called Metal Slug. Metal Slug series, you know, long running series, really cool. Freaking love that series. You know, and like I said, fighting games in Japan, there were so many cool ones, like, and they played perfectly on Saturn. Capcom had like Darkstalkers. Darkstalkers was so awesome in Saturn. It was so perfect. They also had a lot of cool like Marvel games. Like they had X-Men versus Street Fighter. They had Marvel versus Capcom. You know, and then there's just so many. Did SNK vs. Capcom came out in Saturn? I can't remember, or was that later? I don't remember. I do remember the Marvel vs. Capcom, and then Marvel vs. Capcom 2, and those games were freaking out of this world. But aside from the big fighting games by Capcom, and also like the Sega fighters like Virtua Fighter, Fighting Vipers, what else did they make? They made there was one. There's Fighting Vipers, and then there's another one that was like, oh, I don't remember. Anyway, there was like other companies making other fighting games. Like one game, I forget who made it. It's called Waku Waku 7. And this game had some of the most unique characters I've ever seen. And it was very, outlandish, very anime style. But that was one of the other games that needed a RAM cartridge, if I remember correctly. That game was so cool. And they came out with so many cool fighting games. And the only unfortunate thing that killed Sega in my mind, especially back then when I was thinking about it, I was like, what the hell's wrong with Sega? They had so many cool games come out for Saturn, but not in America. If in the late 90s, if you had a Saturn and you were enjoying it, you imported games. You got all these games from Japan, because that's when all the cool, awesome games came out for it. Was in Japan. But Sega of America, for whatever reason, they didn't think a lot of these games would sell well in America for some reason. So they never came out with them. Which it baffled me at the time. So you saw slowly Sega losing a lot of ground because they just didn't have the games. You know, in America they had some cool games like Shining Force 3, which I loved, but from the Genesis days, Shining Force was awesome. But when they made Shining Force 3 for Saturn, it was super ambitious because it actually was supposed to be a 3-part game. Basically, like it was supposed to be like 3 chapters. Only the first chapter ever came to America, and the other 2 came out in Japan. But it was so weird to have like a 3-part game back then. And each game, it wasn't like a third of a game; it was a full game. But for some reason, like they were like, okay, this is gonna be a 3-part epic. Never saw them come to America. Oh well. But one game series that did come to America and in my mind did pretty well. But I enjoyed the hell out of them. Probably a lot more than most other people because obviously Sega was kind of on the downhill by the time they all came out. Was the Panzer Dragoon Saga series. Panzer Dragoon was a cool kind of aerial shooting game, but you were on the back of a dragon. The first games were very like arcadey. They had Panzer Dragoon 1, 2, and then they came out with Panzer Dragoon Saga, which kept the same kind of formula of the original games, but it had RPG elements to it, and that game was so awesome. I freaking loved that game, and the story was epic. The only unfortunate thing is it's a super rare game, because that game came out right around when Sega was really kind of going under, so they made that a very limited edition game. Very few people got that game, and for many years way after that, it was really rare, and if you did find it, it was expensive. I had the foresight. I kind of knew that, I really want this game. I had pre-ordered, I think at GameStop wasn't a thing back then. I think it was just EB Games. When GameStop was a thing, but not too much not too many places here had GameStop. But it was, I think it was at EB Games. I pre-ordered it at, and I made sure to get that game right away. I still have my copy. Yes, I still have my copy of that game. I'll never part with that game. It's one of the ones that it's, I know it's so rare, but it's something that unless you have the game, you'll never really experience it. I believe I know they made a new Panzer Dragoon for like Xbox like way later, but I don't think anybody like ever got a port or like a HD remake of Panzer Dragoon Saga or something. I'm pretty sure, because the unfortunate thing, and this is the thing that confused me to this day, like you have, Sega, they don't make consoles anymore, obviously. Sega, they, put all their games on any console, they don't care. But they make like all these cool like Sega Genesis collections for, they keep coming out on PlayStation, Xbox, and whatever. You can get, the collections of the old Genesis games. But why don't they ever port their Saturn games or make remakes of their Saturn games? The only thing I could think of is the Saturn was really hard to program for, so maybe just like trying to port those games over would just be super difficult to kind of get the coding right. But because here's the thing that's weird. In terms of like emulators, I mentioned I was playing it like Nintendo emulators. You can get an emulator for pretty much anything nowadays. Emulators are super easy for most things. However, the Saturn is super hard to emulate. You could find them, don't get me wrong, people have done it. You could find them, but they're not perfect. Because for some reason, there's something in the Saturn that is hard to crack the ROM of, and the OS of the Saturn. And no one's ever been able to do it perfectly till today. I don't know, I was watching a video a while ago about this guy who was trying to he was going so far to try to reverse engineer Saturn in order to kind of fully understand it, to get a true emulator to be made for it. I don't know if he succeeded till now. I've seen this a while ago, this video of his, but it's very interesting. So you can emulate pretty much anything. You can even emulate PlayStation 2, GameCube emulators. There's all kinds of emulators, for consoles that came out way later. But Saturn is so hard to emulate, and you don't see any Saturn games, specific Saturn games that were only on this system ported to anything later on. Like, you don't see HD upgrades. You don't see it, and that baffles me. I'm like, come on, Sega, whip out your, old code and make Saturn collection. Throw, Sonic games on there. Put one good game that was kind of trying to be different. Nights into Dreams, that was good. But you'd think you'd be able to get that game on something. There's so many awesome titles on the Saturn that are, unless you have a Saturn right now, they're essentially lost. And that's kind of a shame. I almost forgot to mention this other Saturn game. Dragonforce. No, I'm not talking about the old, hair metal band, Dragonforce. It is a hair metal band, but there was a game called Dragonforce. It was like a strategy game, and I loved Dragonforce. And they made a Dragonforce 2 that only came out in Japan. But Dragonforce was cool because you had these big armies battling each other, and they had you could set up your armies in different configurations and different formations. You can have a phalanx configuration, You could have a kind of like a squad based like rows, and it was of course it was like a fantasy based RPG strategy RPG. You had like you had your soldiers, you had your lancers, but you also had like harpies and little dragons and shit, I think, and or dragon men, I should say, and on the whole battlefield, like the game like scrolled from one end to the other, and it was like a huge, long side-scrolling thing that it showed your army on one end and the other army on the other end, and when you choose your what you're gonna do for your attacks, it would like scroll all the way over, like say if you had like archers, you shot your archers all the way over, but like if the other guys had their soldiers, you see them like running across the battlefield, and had to fight each other, and like you could set up your phalanx of armed men in the front, archers in the back, and I mean it was just so cool. I love Dragonforce, and I wish I had the import. I think I still have it, but I have to look for it. That's actually another hard game to find. But I did love Dragonforce. That's a game I wish like somebody would either make a sequel to or do like a remake of in that same old school style. Because it was all sprite based, of course. Another good one. What the hell is the name of that game? Now this is gonna kill me. I remember the name of it now. It's called Guardian Heroes. It was a cool, like, fantasy-based side-scroller, beat 'em up. Very anime style, and it was so cool the way like you level up your characters. Very where they had some RPG elements to it. The amount of sprites that you have on screen on once, and the animation and the moves, it was so fun to play. It was like so smooth, and it was just probably one of the better. If I made like a top 10 list of Saturn games, that would be way up there for sure. Now, I mean, I can go on and on all the awesome Saturn games there was. There was a company. What the hell? Working Designs. That's it. I almost forgot about it. Working Designs back then, there was a company, and they made awesome ports of Japanese RPGs. They would bring them to America because they had a love for Japanese RPGs, and they would do things right. They would like bring out games here, but put like awesome like collector's boxes in them and stuff, and pretty covers and stuff, like foil on it. They did it for like PlayStation, but they also did it for Saturn as well. Like they came out with there was an RPG for Magic Knight Ray Earth, which that was based off the anime. But they made an RPG in Japan, and Working Designs brought it out here. The cover of it was really pretty, really amazing, and just that was such a good company. And I was sad to see them go, quite a while ago. But they really did things right, in terms of they had a love for, especially Japanese RPGs. And the way they crafted their collections, was pretty cool. They used to put like soundtracks in them. Like I said, the boxes were really pretty. And of course, Saturn, they had some bad games. They had like Dynamite Deca. That was like a Die Hard arcade or something like that. I forget what it was called. And you had games like, I wasn't too crazy about them. They had, did they have a, shoot. I know they had like Virtua Cop. That was kind of shitty. But they had also, House of the Dead. They had a port of House of the Dead from the arcade, and the port was kind of shitty, even though the arcade wasn't, all that visually impressive anyways. But they had that for Saturn. What else was good? Again, I can go on for quite some time. And that's just about the Saturn and my love for Sega. I've been a Sega fan ever since. I think I'll continue this conversation. This video is already getting kind of long. It's my 200th episode, so I can excuse it for being long. And I'm sorry, it's not a special episode. I'm not like making it like my 100th episode where it's all like kind of, super sad and stuff. But I just wanted to kind of continue talking about old school video games. I think tomorrow I'll continue on. I'll talk about the PlayStation because I did love the PlayStation. Almost as much as I love my Saturn. Because PlayStation had some awesome games too. I'll save that discussion for tomorrow. For now though, I think I'll leave it at that. I will talk to y'all later. Everybody have a good day. Happy 200th. Yay! And I love you.